But there was a problem. Robin had not been to the dentist since childhood. She also had never documented her blood type. Since a definitive match with known samples could not be made, murder charges could not be filed. As the hunt for suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill ground to an abrupt halt, 120 miles to the north, Detective Carlotta Jarrett of the Bellingham, Washington Police Department was working on a similar case. Wendy Aughey, a 28-year-old single mother, was reported missing when she failed to pick up her daughter. Wendy had a date the evening of April 24th, 1987. She left her daughter as the child's grandmother. When Wendy failed to return a call, the grandmother drove over to her house to find the little girl's favorite pillow. On Wendy's bed, she found bloodstains and called the police. Detective Jarrett obtained a warrant to search the house. Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, was missing. The front door to Wendy's house had been left unlocked. Her wallet and keys were missing. In the bedroom, Detective Jarrett found evidence of a brutal attack.
There was bodily fluids in the bed, and there was a great amount of pooled blood underneath that pillow, which had seeped the mattress below. There was low to medium impact velocity blood spatters on a wall, and there were also blood smears.
Bellingham police retrieved the entire bed as evidence. On the headboard, they found more of Wendy's blood, along with 2 blonde hairs that did not belong to the missing woman. Police also recovered an acrylic fingernail. Wendy's friends told police that she had worn acrylic nails on her date with a man named Michael Johnson. Wendy had met Johnson earlier that afternoon on her lunch break. He was the new bartender at La Paloma restaurant. Detective Jarrett checked the restaurant for leads.
I contacted the owner to see if she filled out an employment application for Mr. Johnson. And the only thing she had was a placemat that he had written some information on. She gave that placemat to me, and we did process it.
While the detective waited for results, she visited a local mission which the bartender had listed on the placemat as his residence. Detective Jarrett spoke to the desk clerk of the mission, who remembered the day Johnson checked out.
We had seen Mr. Johnson at the mission at 7:30 in the morning, the day after that Wendy had a date with him. And at that time, he was wearing black slacks, a vest, white shirt and tie. He told him he was going to work. He also said he met a lady who was going to be. This person also said that Mr. Johnson was driving a red Torino and drove away in it. Previous to this point, he had no vehicle.
On May 4th, 1987, Jarrett received a phone call from police in Eugene, Oregon. They had found Wendy's car, a red Ford Torino, abandoned in the parking lot of the tavern. Inside, police recovered fingerprints that matched the fingerprints found on the placemat. A check through the automated fingerprint identification system revealed that the prints belonged to Darren D. O'Neill, the man wanted for the suspected murder of Robin Smith. Detective Jarrett contacted authorities in Pierce County, 120 miles south of Bellingham. They quickly realized there were striking similarities in both cases.
Since we were convinced that Darren O'Neill was responsible for Robin Smith's death, and we also felt that he was responsible for Wendy Aughey's disappearance and possible death, we felt that the rest of the people in the country were also at great risk from Darren O'Neill.
Pierce County deputies called in the FBI to assist in the hunt. Former Special Agent Del Oros of the FBI's Tacoma Residue Agency was assigned the case.
At that point, we knew we were dealing with an individual extremely mobile and extremely dangerous. He had a history of a violent sexual predator, and now he had the current tag or label of a murderer.
Since Wendy and Robin's bodies were still missing, formal murder charges were not filed. Sexual assault charges against O'Neill were still pending in Colorado. The FBI opened a federal case against the fugitive for unlawful flight to avoid prosecution. Still, O'Neill managed to stay one step ahead. No one knew that the suspected serial killer fled after he left Oregon. And authorities still had no murder case unless they found the bodies of the missing women. In May 1987, evidence pointed to the brutal slaying of 2 innocent women in Washington state. The FBI and local police launched a media campaign to flush out suspected killer Darren D. O'Neill. Dozens of agents fanned out to investigate sightings all over the Pacific Northwest. O'Neill was spotted hitchhiking at truck stops north and south of Seattle. One trucker gave O'Neill a ride on May 23rd. He claimed his passenger thanked him for the ride because the cops were after him. The trucker pulled off the highway a short time later and left O'Neill just a few miles outside the city. Special Agent Del Oros recalled that even as leads came in, the hunt for the elusive killer did not get any easier.
The months immediately following the disappearance of Robin Smith and Wendy Hoffman were extremely frustrating because of O'Neill's change in facial appearance, change in weight. People were consistently telling us that the pictures that we were showing of O'Neill were actually 2 different people. Well, they weren't.
The FBI focused on places the drifter might blend in. Because O'Neill was constantly on the move, agents questioned travelers at local bus and train stations. They hoped someone had spotted O'Neill and would remember his distinctive tattoos. Even when they found people who had seen the fugitive, it was always too late. O'Neill was comfortable in the ever-changing world of transients and drifters, where people could easily disappear forever.
It wasn't as though we were going to find Darren O'Neill at the local Ramada Inn. It forced us to take a hard look at the reality of having to search for him in places where he would blend in very, very easily. By way of example, we looked in bus stops, homeless shelters, day labor camps. He was certainly not anyone who was going to be holding a 9-to-5 job, which really did increase the difficulty in trying to find him as the pursuit went on to subsequent months.
While agents and detectives continued to pursue hundreds of mostly false sightings, detectives were called to the rural area surrounding Crystal Mountain, just east of Washington State's Mount Rainier. Hikers had reported finding what appeared to be human remains. The location was close to where a flagman had seen O'Neill's car about a month earlier, not long after Robin Smith's disappearance. Just inside the wood line, officers spotted a jawbone and a skull. Each item was carefully flagged before it was retrieved. As Stout and Wilson surveyed the crime scene, they wondered whether the remains were Robin's. Investigators also found other bones scattered in the vicinity. Folded clothing was found hidden in the base of a nearby tree. It matched the description of the outfit Robin had worn to the party. They also recovered a wallet. Inside, they found Robin Smith's driver's license. Investigators fanned out to cover a wide area. Their persistence paid off. They found a claw hammer with markings similar to the one reported missing by one of O'Neill's former employers. Detectives also suspected it was the murder weapon. The Pierce County medical examiner agreed. A careful examination of the remains revealed that Robin had probably died as the result of blunt force trauma to the head. Darren D. O'Neill was charged with first-degree murder.
Once the remains of Robin Smith were found, we certainly had confirmation that a murder occurred. By virtue of that murder, the Washington federal authorities then issued their own separate and second investigation. They issued another unlawful flight to avoid prosecution warrant for him.
The FBI was more determined than ever to get their hands on the man responsible for this heinous crime. By June 1987, the FBI had issued 2 federal warrants for the arrest of suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill, still on the loose in the Pacific Northwest. The remains of one woman had been recovered close to Mount Rainier. The second woman was still missing and presumed dead. Since O'Neill was last known to be in Eugene, Oregon, Special Agent Michael Elsey of the FBI's Portland field office was called in.
Knowing that he was a sexual predator, I went and checked with the local police agencies with some of their sexual assault cases, see if his MO fit any of, or description or anything fit any of their pending cases.
It meant hundreds of man-hours, but agents refused to simply wait for another sighting or another victim. Dozens of agents met with detectives in districts across the region to try to link O'Neill to outstanding sexual assault cases. The search was complicated by the fact that O'Neill looked very different in each of his mugshots. Most often, the agents left empty-handed. Frustrated and out of leads, agents continued to wade through hundreds of old case files. With a dangerous predator on the prowl, agents had to exhaust every possibility. An agent met with police detective Bill Carter in Portland. As he's done a dozen times before, the agent compared O'Neill's picture to sketches of sexual predators. One sketch stood out. It bore a strong resemblance to the fugitive. A 14-year-old girl named Heidi Lang had provided the drawing 5 months earlier when she filed rape charges against her unknown attacker. From the police report, her description of the crime sounded eerily similar to O'Neill's other assaults.
Looking at the photos of Mr. O'Neill, especially when he had a beard and the glasses, saw that there was quite a bit of resemblance between the two, and the method and MO were similar as well. Luckily, he did not kill Miss Lang, as he had other subjects.
Agent Elsey wanted to speak with Heidi Lang as soon as possible. Detective Carter arranged a meeting between the young girl and the FBI. With her mother by her side, she told the story from the beginning. At around midnight on January 17, 1987, 2 months before Robin Smith disappeared, Heidi broke her mother's curfew and walked to the nearby convenience store to get a soda. It was a tough part of town. And then walked up many times. As she crossed an overpass leading to the store, a trucker called to her from his parked rig. She ignored him and walked on. It only took her a few minutes to get the soda. Then she started back home. She walked as quickly as she could to get back before her mother knew she had left. Heidi told investigators that as she approached the overpass, the man and the truck were gone. But on the other side of the overpass, the trucker jumped out of the bushes and grabbed her. He forced her down in the embankment of the truck and shoved her into the center parked at the side of the highway. Years later, Heidi recalls that she believed her young life was over.
The first thing I noticed is how dangerous he was. I felt that he had every intention of killing me. There was no question in my mind.
He threw her into the sleeper compartment of his truck. She was terrified, with no idea where he might take her or what he might do.
He threatened to make me a whore, sell me to pimps. He was gonna cut me open. I tried finding what was going to keep from angering this man. I had to behave like I was just holding conversation with him, and at the same time learn what I could about him.
Despite Heidi's best efforts, the trucker climbed into the sleeper compartment and repeatedly raped the 14-year-old for 4 hours.
And he did not like to think of you as a woman that brought him to violence. I had to keep him talking, mostly to keep his mind off other things. And I tried my best to give him the impression that I was insignificant. And I was just there to be there with him. And it wouldn't mean anything if he let me go.
Heidi's insight and courage paid off. After suffering hours of abuse, her tormentor let her go. She ran until she reached a truck stop. She asked an employee for a ride home. After all she'd been through, Heidi bravely submitted to a rape test. This provided investigators with samples of the rapist's semen, though no match could be made until the suspect was in custody. When Heidi finished her story, Detective Carter showed her a number of photos of O'Neill and some similar-looking men.
It was amazing that he was in it, and I did see him, and I picked him out. I really did not expect to see him in them. I hadn't really heard anything since I had given the sketch.
Seeing her attacker's face brought the memories flooding back, but she never hesitated to press charges. Heidi was determined to face her rapist and put him behind bars.
I think that she wanted to see that this person did not do that to anyone else ever again. And so it showed very much strength in her character, and especially at the age of 14, being able to be so descriptive in the events that occurred, the description of the subject and him that kind of got us to the path where we were.
Agent Elsey called the Tacoma office. They finally had a witness to testify against O'Neill. But they still had to find him. Agent Del Oros called FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. to request additional assistance. On June 18, 1987, Darren D. O'Neill's name was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. The case was now a priority for every FBI office in the country. Agents had to find O'Neill before he could strike again. In June of 1987, suspected serial killer Darren D. O'Neill was added to the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Special Agent Del Oros was in charge of the case. He convinced the FBI's Fugitive Publicity Unit in Washington, D.C. that Darren D. O'Neill fit the list's criteria.
The Bureau's determination as to who goes on to the top 10 wanted list was a function of a lot of different factors. Primarily, it's the protection of the community. Secondarily, it has to do with the ability of those individuals to be mobile, transport themselves across interstate lines, so effectively going from state to state.
With nationwide publicity, the manhunt for O'Neill was relentless. Countless sightings were reported in several states. O'Neill was most often spotted in bars and taverns in the Northwest. Investigators followed up on dozens of leads, only to find witnesses with vague descriptions of the fugitive. Nobody knew of his whereabouts. Agents were left with little to go on.
So we had a long stretch of time when the clues were drying up. The leads from other agents were not producing any form of immediate return. We were going back to the same people, consistently re-interviewing the family, friends. We were reaching out as far as going to prior instructors, prior employers, looking for some type of clue that would tell us or show us a pattern of his activity and his mobility across the country.
7 months later, on February 3rd, 1988, agents discovered that O'Neill had made his way to Lakeland, Florida. He was spotted by a Lakeland police officer conducting what appeared to be a drug deal. The officer was unaware that O'Neill was wanted for murder. O'Neill noticed the cop but did nothing. The officer turned his car around to investigate. When the cruiser pulled past the stopped car, O'Neill pulled up and asked for directions, pretending he was lost. The officer asked him to pull over. Instead, O'Neill took off. The officer followed, calling in the Louisiana tags on O'Neill's car as he drove. O'Neill tried to lose him, zigzagging through the streets of Lakeland. When their car jumped a curb, the suspects ran. The officer pursued on foot and eventually caught them all. O'Neill was extradited to Louisiana when police learned the car he'd been driving was reported stolen from that state. When asked, O'Neill told police his name was Jean Mayeux.
The clerk, who was working nights, compared the fingerprints of the individual that she knew as Jean Mayeux to the list of FBI top 10 wanted fugitives and found that the individual
extradited to Washington State to face charges. The state prosecutors knew their cases were weak. Since Wendy Allkey's body was never recovered, O'Neill could not be charged with her murder. The Robin Smith case was stronger, but lacked definitive forensic identification. It would be difficult to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the body found in the woods was Robin Smith's. Despite the evidentiary obstacles, prosecutors moved ahead with the Robin Smith case. They would take their chances with a jury. O'Neill and his attorney would never let the case get that far. In a Pierce County court on January 4th, 1989, O'Neill pled guilty to first-degree murder in the killing of Robin Smith. Detective Wilson knew there was an ulterior motive behind the plea.
The court system in the state of Washington at that time was if a person was convicted of first-degree murder, but there was a loophole in there. If you pled guilty to the charge, the most sometime you got was 333 months.
The family of Robin Smith was devastated. Even without parole, O'Neill would be free well before the end of his natural life. The killer still faced charges in Portland, Oregon for the kidnapping and rape of 14-year-old Heidi Lang. If convicted, O'Neill would be put away for life. But prosecutors had a problem. Deputy District Attorney Charles Sparks recalls that the rape kit Heidi had provided at the time of her assault would not be admissible for a comparison with O'Neill.
There was a sexual assault kit that included vaginal swabs that were taken, and that had molded because of the way these things were stored back then, and it was not usable. And DNA evidence would have been very helpful, but we just didn't have it.
On May 16, 1990, as O'Neill's trial began, prosecutors knew their only chance was to put Heidi on the witness stand to face her attacker. It would be traumatic for her, but it was their best hope for putting O'Neill behind bars for good.
So it was very difficult for me to testify at the trial. It was even more difficult to look at him face to face. It was very frightening, very scary experience. First of all, at this point, I had promised this man that I wouldn't tell anybody what happened. And this is a man who had no qualms about going after anybody, even just a girl walking down the street in the middle of the night. I knew I had to put him away. I was as good as dead. That's the way I feel.
Heidi pointed out the man who had kidnapped and raped her, sitting sullenly just a few yards in front of her. Her testimony was enough to convict O'Neill. The jury found him guilty on all 16 counts of kidnapping and rape. Under Oregon law, he was sentenced to 135 years in prison. Darren D. O'Neill is serving his first sentence of 27 years at a Washington State penitentiary. He will then be transferred to Oregon to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
Once he was convicted, I was able to put a lot of this in the past. I was able to put it away. And that was most important to me. That's the most, I don't think I would have ever gotten over this if we hadn't put him away.
For Agent Oros, though he has since left the FBI to serve as Deputy District Attorney in Sacramento, California, The case remains fresh in his mind.
To this very day, I still have a wanted flyer for Jeremy O'Neill hanging in my office here, just in his office. Even on the walls, a constant reminder of the dangers that face each and every one of us if we go out on the street, and particularly aware of the fact that he represents significant danger to women in society. And he's an individual that was a cold, calculated murder. And he reaffirms to me that I'm in a profession that matters, and that every day when I go into court, I'm there to make a difference.
An hour north of New York City, a band of deadly gunmen descended on a peaceful suburban community. They struck quickly and savagely. Agents learned that the gang's leader had been living underground for more than 2 decades. The FBI's New York Anti-Terrorist Task Force hoped they could find this most wanted fugitive before he killed the gang. Rockland County, New York, 1981. The burgeoning suburb just 20 miles north of New York City had become a refuge of former city dwellers. Most left their urban homes in pursuit of safer, more affordable neighborhoods for their families. They enjoyed more open space and lower crime rates. The town of Nanuet was typical and drew many people to its new law. At 3:40, October 20th, 1981, a Brinks armored truck made its regularly scheduled pickup from a retailer. One guard remained in the truck while another watched the doors. The third returned with cash and receipts. With no warning, a gang of masked men burst out of a red van. One guard was hit in the throat, another was hit in the arm. The gunman then trained their weapons on the driver. He shot back, but the assailant's gunfire was overwhelming. One guard managed to climb into the back of the truck for protection. Police Chief Alan Colsey of the South Nyack Grandview Police Department was 5 miles away when he received the call. Officers from other nearby towns were also called, since Nanuet was too small to support its own police force.
In October of 1981, when the Brinks case occurred, it was an extremely shocking event for the entire area of Rockland County, for the Nyack community, for the Clarkstown community. This was something that they had never expected to ever see.
Clarkstown police and paramedics arrived first. They placed one guard on life support, hoping he would survive the ride to the hospital. Brinks guard Peter Page would never get that chest. A gunshot had severed major arteries in his right shoulder and neck. He died before help arrived. The uninjured driver said, though the gunman had worn masks, he believed they were black males. They sped off in a red van. From a deposit box, police learned that $1.6 million was missing. $1.3 million remained in the trunk. Chief Colsey received updates as he raced to the crime scene.
The first information coming in from the Nanuet scene was that the suspects had been seen escaping in a red van. They were eastbound on Route 59. This would take them along a route adjacent to the New York State Thruway, which leads directly into New York City over the Tappan Zee Bridge.
Moments later, a local resident close to the mall reported seeing masked gunmen in a parking lot, transferring sacks and weapons into a small moving truck. The witness told Clarkstown police that the vehicles exited eastbound. Detective Arthur Keenan and two other police cruisers were on Route 59, close to the Thruway entrance when they received the update.
We proceeded on to Route 59 and the New York State Thruway to see if we would save a getaway vehicle. We went to that area figuring that would be a getaway route.
When the officers arrived at the intersection of Mountain View Road and Interstate 87, they noticed a moving truck waiting to turn left onto the Thruway. Keenan ordered one patrol unit to block the on-ramp. Then, Detective Keenan received a call about a second moving truck.
At that time, there was a radio transmission from the Orangetown police that they had a U-Haul truck heading southbound on Route 304 near the New Jersey line, which was approximately the same distance from the Nanuet Mall as we were.
Unsure if the truck on Route 59 was the suspects, Sergeant Edward O'Grady and Detective Keenan blocked the truck. Officers Brian Lennon and Waverly Chip Brown approached the drivers.
The suspects were described as being black males. At the intersection, we observed the driver and passenger as being white individuals.
The woman objected to the shotgun. Sergeant O'Grady directed Lennon to return the gun to the patrol car. They believed they had stopped the wrong truck. As Lennon secured the gun, the detective inspected the back of the moving truck. Though it didn't appear locked, the back door wouldn't open. He told the couple that he wanted to see what was inside.
I couldn't understand why it wouldn't open. I wanted to know what was in the back of the truck. As I was set that noise came from the truck, I turned. The suspects were coming out of the back shooting.
Rounds from the officer's six-shot revolvers bounced off the bulletproof vests worn by the armed men. Officer Lennon rushed back to his patrol car for his shotgun. Officer Brown was shot in the neck and shoulder and fell to the ground. Even if the officers were wearing their vests, it wouldn't have helped.
We were at a disadvantage. In addition to which the ammunition that was being used with the M16 was capable of going through the vest.
As the masked gunman approached, one executed Officer Brown. Detective Keenan was hit in the leg and ran for cover.
I was still being fired at after I took fire. I was still in the lights, 3 rounds behind, shot chest on.
Officer Lennon had unlocked his shotgun and he was taking heavy fire. The gunman ran to the police car trying to clear it for escape. cars arrived at the scene. The suspects gathered the money bags and piled into the car. One suspect never made it to the car. A passing motorist grabbed the woman who had been a passenger in the car and prevented her escape. He watched the white Oldsmobile and tan Honda speed away. Officers Keenan and Lennon rushed to help their injured colleagues.
As the suspects made their getaway, once of all, Waverly Brown, video ready to see if there's anything I could do for them. Waverly Brown and Eddie were both beyond any medical attention that I could.
Still on foot, Chief Alan Paulson's main focus now was to find the fleeing vehicles. But reports were scattered hard to decide.
It was very, very difficult at this particular time to get a clear, open communication from anyone out in the field back to a desk area because of the number of communications that were literally stepping up.
As the chief approached the area, he determined that the crime scene didn't need any more personnel. He set out to find those responsible.
I didn't want to interfere with the emergency response in that area. The road was completely blocked. So knowing that this particular escape route would lead them in a particular direction, I made a U-turn at Route 59 and traced my steps back.
He figured the suspects would travel towards New York City, where there was potential for a greater volume. He believed their route would take them along Mountain View Avenue for 2 weeks.
I figured there was a 50-50 shot that they were either going to go east or west, and that I could cover at least one of those avenues of escape, and went immediately to that area as quickly as I could. In fact, en route to that particular intersection, I observed the suspect vehicles, two of them, at a high rate of speed heading east on Richard Hill Road.
The chief followed the cars. He radioed in his position and asked for backup.
It was clear to me, based upon the events that had transpired up until that point, that these were extremely dangerous individuals who had no compulsion, no regard for human life, and no hesitancy to take the utmost of violent actions against anybody who stood in their way.
Until units were up, it would be up to him to stop two vehicles that held 6 heavily armed contractors. After following for a few minutes, the chief noticed that 2 passengers in the Honda had walked out of sight, perhaps to load guns.
As we hit the corner of 6th and Broadway, the Oldsmobile makes a right hand turn on Broadway going south of the and the van behind that attempts to do the same, but slides, skids across the road.
The chief positioned his car between himself and the fugitive. Through his gun, he continued to call for backup, hoping his voice could be heard through the clamor of some units.
I continually order the suspects out of the vehicle. There's a period of a few seconds where nothing in fact happens. And then the door opens up, and I see the female put her feet out onto the roadway and remain seated in the front seat of the car.
The chief repeated his command to exit the vehicle with their hands in the air. The woman then began to reach behind the seat for half a minute.
Despite my repeated orders to the contrary, one of the suspects again walking up towards me. The female was attempting to reach around and get something which I immediately assumed to be a weapon.
The chief was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. He made one more desperate call for backup. On October 20th, 1981, the Nyack, New York police chief had stopped one of 2 getaway cars filled with suspects from an armored car that had left 3 dead and 2 wounded. As he continued, one suspect moved behind his seat. Another approached the chief wearing a bulletproof was outnumbered, and neither of the suspects obeyed his orders. As the chief made one last desperate headlook, back of the room, they secured the scene and pulled a third suspect from the back seat. Police believed that he had been an armed lookout for the other two, but was injured and dropped his weapon when their getaway car careened out of control. Police searched the car. In the trunk, they recovered sacks that held in excess of $1 million. Under the front seat, they found a loaded 9mm pistol, the weapon the woman had likely been reaching for. Thousands attended the funeral for the officers slain at the October 20th